guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Agent Boost podcast. You know we're committed to doing this because we just had our big Agent Boost pre-AEP conference with all the carriers yesterday and the day before, so Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, and it was really chaotic leading up to it, and this week has been super busy. Our team's been kind of stressed to the max, but that's how you know we're rocking it, is here on Thursday, putting out another episode. So today, couple things that we wanted to talk about was we wanted to kind of give a little bit of a recap of some of our takeaways from the conference, meeting with some of the carriers, talking with a lot of the agents, and then also kind of talk about some grassroots lead generation things that we were working with, that we kind of did a panel on yesterday. So last week we talked about essentially digital lead gen, inbound calls, and kind of a little bit higher end digital lead buy thing, and now let's talk about some more grassroots, how to go gen business if you got no dollars but you got a lot of time.
Yep, absolutely. So observations from yesterday. Yeah, it was chaotic. I'm dragging a little bit, today. I'll be honest, it was a rough week, but nonetheless, we had a great agent turnout. I think the feedback was really positive. What we really did is we had like a 2-day conference, and we used to do it in 1 day, but we just found that it was just too much to just cram into a day. So, and we'll talk ACA and health and everything else too. But now with 3 lines of business, Medicare, ACA, life, a lot of different partners, we just needed 2 days to stretch that out. So we really had a kind of conference style kickoff and multiple speakers, multiple carriers. What we're really trying to encourage with these types of events is not so much a slide deck presentation. I think at this point, most agents are really proficient where they can look at an SOB, look at benefits. And what we're really trying to differentiate is what is really setting a carrier apart, and what is the value prop to sell the product in the market. That's what we're trying to get carriers to focus on when they're presenting to our agents. So we did that conference style, a lot of different carrier partners there. And then we also did some breakout sessions where we were talking about, either growing or scaling your business, how to generate leads, some compliance, for those that were really more concerned about all the 2024 regs. So a mixture of breakout sessions, overall business, industry specific. And then
Keynotes,
of course, keynote. And then of course, we had some fun at the end with our casino night party. So It was a good time.
Absolutely. So we had a lot of local carrier partners here. We did have some of our national carrier partners here. We had WellCare come out, Devoted, friends from Columbus,
Ambetter, Select Health.
It was kind of a mixed bag. And one of my takeaways was there's definitely a lot of opportunity, and there's so much of a choose your own adventure with agents these days. And I think a lot of agents were excited about the opportunity of getting back into business, with jumping back in with both feet, so to say. One of my things that I really liked, I don't know if you can talk about this off the top of your head or not, but one of the things you talked about that was popular was the riff on Robert Sala's 4 different types of agents. So I had a couple agents comment on that. Are you prepared to talk about the 4 different types of agents off the top of your head, or do you need your slide deck?
No, I can freestyle. So
freestyle it for a minute, because I think that was a popular takeaway from yesterday.
It was, and it was funny because I had some agents come up to me, as CEO, and they were going, "Did you come up with that, or is that someone?" I'm like, I've been doing this for over a decade. This is, of course I busted that out, and it really comes back to, I was watching Hard Knocks, and every once in a while you're listening to someone else's podcast, you're watching something, and it just hits you, and you're like, yes, this, I can relate to this so much. So I was watching Hard Knocks with my son like 2 weeks ago when I was prepping for this conference, and Robert Saleh, we're not going to talk about the sadness of the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and his injury
Travesty.
and all that. It's just terrible. Anyways, but and he did this real speech, and he was talking about 4 types of players on their team, and he broke it down in 4 categories. You have the commanders at the top, then you have the competitors, the contenders, and the survivors, and those were his 4 categories of players on that team. Mm-hmm. And he started describing the attributes of all those different types. And the one thing that really resonated, and he says, I guarantee you fit this organization, you fit one of these boxes, you're one of these players, and no matter what, you're going to be here. And he kind of started describing the attributes of them. And so I kind of made that same comparison to our agent community, because I really do feel that it was just so relevant. And it was The first one was the survivor, and this kind of agent is, the agent that makes excuses for everything. This agent, it's a bad leads. Carriers didn't make good products. There was provider disruption.
My FMO sucks.
Yeah, this thing doesn't work. There's too much regulation. But at the end of the day, it was always someone else's fault and never their fault. There was no accountability. And the other big thing about this type of agent or player in the squad is they're miserable. They're unhappy people. They're not successful. And usually they're trying to, misery loves company. So they're trying to take as many people down with them so that they can be in that company with all those other miserable people, right? And we see that a lot with the agent community, right? Is when they're not having wins and they're not successful, it's always somebody else's fault. And let's recruit a friend, And then the next category of agent, the competitor. Yeah. Or excuse me, the contender.
Oh yeah, contender.
Contender. That's I liken it to the agent that's maybe gotten over the hump, so to speak, like their first year or two in the business. There's so much to learn. There's building a little bit of revenue and figuring a few things out and getting a little bit more proficient, and they have that capability to really become successful, but they have to stay engaged. They're still very susceptible to failure. They can be extremely distracted, and the biggest thing is it's always external factors for these people. If there's a specific spiff or comp or bonus in place, then they're going to perform. If there's some recognition or trophy or award, then they're going to perform. If there's some other external thing going, then they're going to have success. But the moment that external factor goes away, their production goes away, their whole business is in jeopardy, and that I have really seen that in the agent community. And of course, these people have the skills and they have the ability and they could be great, but they just can't get out of their own way and they just can't focus. It's always those external factors. And I would even use it to like the excuses that I hear from agents all the time of, well, my dog was sick. I had this. I had sick kids. I had
family this. Yeah.
Well, like I get it. Like we all have that. Like I'm here to tell you that people have rough lives and like we all have to overcome those obstacles, but those are those external factors that they're always using as a crutch to say like why I can't succeed. Anyways, the third one is going to be that competitor, and that's like that person that just is always in it. It does not matter what's going on. It doesn't matter the noise going on in their personal life. It doesn't matter if the carriers have good products, bad products. It doesn't matter if there's network disruption. It doesn't matter if their leads are good, bad. They always find a way to get it done. They're always going to have good sales seasons. Incentives are great, but they don't need it. They're just running their business. They're winning, and they're just writing business no matter what. They don't need coddling. They don't need hand-holding. No one needs to be their personal life coach to, bring them up and bring them back to production. They're just doing their thing. And that's that, competitor. And then the commander is the agent that's everything that a competitor is. But then they squash negativity, they're positive, they're winning, and they bring other people with them, and sometimes they're, agency owners and they're in leadership roles. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just in a market, they're in a group or a collective, an FMO, an agency, and even if they don't have a title, these people are just naturally leaders.
Their reputation precedes them. Yeah, they're the legends in the markets. Yeah. Yeah,
and they're just, and again, the biggest attribute to these people is sometimes they're financially motivated to bring others with them, but a lot of times they're not. They raise the bar for everybody around them. So anyways, that's probably more than you wanted, but yes, I freestyled that.
Yeah, that was it. That was a good takeaway. Dan and I gave keynotes, something a little bit non-industry, very specific. You can only talk about plan expansions and rollouts and benefits and things like that so long before agents' brains start to melt. And so we tried to add in a little bit more of some personal development, some goal setting. My keynote was essentially on using this industry, getting into this business, because everybody that's listening to this, everybody that's in insurance got into this business for roughly the same reason, right? And it was to have the financial flexibility to live the life that they wanted to. And so my whole talk was how to do that with intention, how to set goals very specifically. And what we'll do is we're going to actually chop up and drop both of those videos. I think both of them will probably be in our YouTube channel here, and we'll cut them up as as content, so we don't have to go into those too much. But the gist of it was all of you agents got into this business as well too, to have a business that could provide you financial freedom and flexibility to live the life that you wanted to. And my challenge was essentially asking agents if they're living up to their commitment, right? If they were living up to their end of the bargain. Because as we often talk about, a lot of agents will work to the exact level of where they're comfortable, and then they'll take their foot off the gas. And for all of us, that's different, right? Some people are comfortable making, much less money. Some people it takes a little bit more. But by and large, everybody we see will work to where they get that level of where they're meeting their needs financially. And sometimes my challenge was to ask people if where they took their foot off the gas, if where they started to coast was actually where they wanted to be, right? Because a lot of times it's not. And they kind of sold themselves a little bit short, or they got a little bit too comfortable too early, and they needed to really kind of evaluate where they're at, take a second look if this career was really turning out and shaping out to be what they wanted it to be, and if they were putting in the kind of effort that they should have. And that was kind of another takeaway that I had, was a lot of agents that we've seen in the industry for a long time, it seemed like the field agents, the traditional field agents that have been around the block for a long time, they're even now starting to accept the new reality of the current state of the industry and realizing, hey, it's probably never going to go back to how it was in 2019 or 2015 or 2011. CMS is not going to go back and hit the reset button and make things how they were in, Medicare Advantage back 10 years ago. The new world is here to stay. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be chaotic. And they're trying to find ways to adapt in the current environment.
And before we go there, I was just going to say I had sidebar conversations with agents too, just talking observations and, wrap up from our conference. I had a couple of them grab me and, regarding your keynote and everything else, and talking about, expectations. And I told them, I said, look, the nice thing about being self-employed is that I work, 70 hours a week, but I get to choose the 70 hours a week I work, right? It's not that, and someone started talking about like the 10-hour work week or whatever that book is. And
4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss.
It's horse shit, and I was like, look, and that is exactly what I told them. I was like, look, you read some book that said there was like a 4-hour work week.
Go be a drop shipper on Amazon.
Well, yeah. And they were
buy my course.
Well, and that was the whole thing is, we were talking about your speech, your keynote, and we were like, look, your expectation is not in alignment with what you want. In your mind, you're thinking we're going to go back to where we were again, to our point, not to keep dwelling on it, but it's 2015 again, and you're going to go work hard in AEP for 3 months out of the year, make all these sales, and then sit by and work 4 hours a week for the whole rest of the year. And I was like, that's not a reasonable expectation, because what's going to happen is now those DST, those disaster and whatever election codes and everything else, and all the DSNP and the increasing DSNPs, and now with all the election codes, people are working year round. And it's like, that's not, you now work this consistent level throughout the year, and then you bring up your hours and your performance during the enrollment seasons, and then you can go back to that comfortable level of work. But you're not in these zones where you just work 4 hours a week, 5 months out of the year. That's just not a thing. And so that was kind of an eye-opener to a lot of the agents as well. And I think they're finally, after about 4 years of kind of either staying stagnant or losing a little bit of their business, I think that was one of my takeaways, is it was almost like this aha moment where we've been beating people over the head for years, and it kind of clicked, it felt like.
Yeah. So it's funny, there's that entrepreneurial saying where you work 70 hours a week so you don't have to work 40 hours a week.
Well,
right?
It is true. And that's the thing. I was telling them, that's the nice thing about the flexibilities. I never miss my kids' sporting events. I'm always there for their activities. I'm always able to be a great dad and a husband, all these things, and just coordinate my life. But that just means that I got to come in earlier these hours, and I'm working at 6 a.m. these days, or I'm juggling that balance. And then after the kids go to sleep, I'm staying up late doing whatever. But again, I don't skip the time, though. The time's always put in.
Yeah, that's the interesting component, again, that we always talk about, is that financial freedom and flexibility, it's flexibility. That doesn't mean that it's absolving you from having to put the work in, right? Especially at the very beginning, especially when you're trying to build a book of business, when you're getting into the industry, when you've got to learn. It's no different than literally any other business that we talk about. It's funny that people get in and they think that they can make this business go working 4 hours a week or an hour a day. And it's like, no, that's the time when you got to be,
Well, I think, and we distilled this perception of, You didn't just write hundreds of Medicare Advantage policies or ACA or whatever it is, and you created a book of business, and then you got to this plateau or this certain point, and then suddenly it was like, great, I achieved the benchmark. Now it's on maintenance and mode, and I can just coast, and I'm now at 4 hours per week. I've achieved it. Done. That we distilled that, quite a bit, and I really do think that was how people ran their businesses back for a lot of years.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, 10 years ago, you used to be able to count on a 93% plus retention rate if you were in a less competitive market and you had good face-to-face clients and you were a great agent. Now,
less products,
you've got to defend the territory all year long. You've got more competitors in the marketplace coming after your business year round. There's so many different carriers. The average number of Hickens in any different county has just exploded. And that's not going away, right? I mean, we are in a little bit of a
turf war.
Yeah, turf war, a phase of optimization. But these agents, we've seen agents have big books of business, and they've been slowly trending downward over the past 3 or 4 years, and they're waiting for CMS to come in and say, no, close the door on SEPs, only make it so my people can change during 2 months out of the year, so I only have to play defense during 2 months of the year rather than all year long, right? And then I want to set my phone on the desk and be out messing around.
But I think the thing with CMS is, right, they are always weighted more towards the consumer and that Medicare beneficiary than they are the agent. They're kind of going to say, we're always going to rule on the side of the consumer, not the agent. And if this makes the agent life difficult, that's okay. Having more flexibility, more freedom, more options, more choice for the consumer is what we're going to, lean towards.
Yeah. Well, and that in between, Medicare, the amount of people who are qualifying for Medicare, who are qualifying for Medicaid, LIS, and then on the ACA side of things too, with all the people that are getting subsidies, we talk about it, but there's really an appetite from the government right now and the current administration to add and expand as many people onto these roles as possible. And by default, having de facto election periods, more flexibility, more options to be able to get onto those during the year definitely does open the door for more people to get into those programs year round.
Yeah, and for anybody who's been selling health, or the IFP, that individual family plans, like just regular health insurance, you've seen this where, now during, open enrollment, and it's typically November 1st to December 15th, right? But then you can continue selling in December, but then those go in effect on, February 1st. Usually in January, though, they kind of assess, enrollment numbers and who's where. And it's very common that they just open it back up again and say, hey, we're going to reopen the enrollment period. Go ahead and keep enrolling people. So it's just like, hey, we haven't hit our quota or our sales target yet. Let's keep this thing going. And I will say that is very much, I think, the appetite right now. And not to get into politics, on the podcast or anything else like that. People ask about Medicare for all or socialized medicine, all these very, far agendas. And I think most people are kind of in the middle, when it comes to societally. And so I think sometimes they want to achieve objectives of going about it another way. No different than when you're selling an annuity and you tell somebody like, hey, here's this great annuity. And they're like, it's like a trigger word. I don't want to buy an annuity. But then if you're like, hey, you can never lose your money. You're guaranteed this amount. And you describe what the annuity does. They're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And you're like, guess what? I'm describing an annuity to you.
Surprise.
Exactly. So it's the same thing, I think, from a policy perspective is usually there's an objective they want to get to, and you can't just flip the switch and make it happen. You kind of have to do it over a period of 10 or 20 years to get to that end goal. So.
It's the slow drip, right? It's the frog in boiling water effect, because when you come out and say, let's go Medicare for all or whatever, everybody's defenses perk up. But if you go, well, let's just slowly and systematically start expanding these different programs and expanding the number of beneficiaries on these programs, and then 10 years down the road, you go, oh, what do you know? I mean, we're already almost here anyway. We might as well let's just flip the switch.
Yeah. And I kind of likened it to, or made the comparison to legalization of marijuana, right? We're back, I don't know how many years ago. Was it 10 years ago maybe? It was like, oh no, and polls were happening and nationwide. It was, very unpopular and people didn't want to do it. And now like, year after year after year, the polling just changes to where now you look at all the states and, most states, at least medical is what legalized, and, a lot of states recreational, and even in the states where it's not approved or legal, you still like survey the people and they're kind of like, I'm indifferent, or I don't care. It's not a big deal. That's kind of the general sentiment. And I feel like that's a great example of how over like a decade, public opinion changed, with that. So I think that's what we're probably seeing with healthcare, where you have HHS, Health and Human Services. Sorry, I'm used to acronyms. They're overseeing, CMS, and you got Medicare and health and the subsidies. And if you're really looking at, here's this segment of healthcare of people on Medicare, and at the same time there's subsidies because we have LIS, level 1, 2, 3, 4, Quimby's, Slimby's. We have all these different, subsidy levels. That's already happening in Medicare, and you already have privatization of it with all these Medicare Advantage plans and everything else. And now you have regular health insurance, right, and post-ACA and people getting subsidies, and it's all, and now, I mean, I don't even know the numbers off the top of my head, but there's families making $100,000 a year with kids and dependents, and they're still getting subsidies, so that's
subsidies available depending on dependents, even higher. It's crazy.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's all going to kind of like meet in the middle eventually. And so I think that was the other thing that we were very openly discussing at our conference, yesterday, and how, the environment wasn't great for people to be selling health back a handful of years ago, when right after post-ACA, when, all those co-ops were failing, when agents weren't getting paid commissions, when carriers were very disruptive, pulling in and out of the market. But there's been a lot more stabilization in that marketplace. And now it seems like the carriers that have survived it, obviously they have to put in more funds too, like reserve funds when carriers fail, when Bright or Friday or some of these other carriers are starting to fail, the other carriers don't even like it, because then they have to kick in so many more millions of dollars in reserves. It's not necessarily like, it's gangbusters for us. We're just now going to crush it because so much of that capital has to go back into reserve accounts. But anyways, it just has become a much more stable market. And so now when you're already out there doing AHIP and going through carrier certs and everything else, it's not that hard to do an FFM cert and a few other little certifications to, now cross-sell. And, hey, I just did a T65 enrollment for Bob and Sally's only 61. Now I can take care of both of them, get more referrals, cross-sell, lower my acquisition costs that way, and then also sell year-round, more revenue opportunities for growth. That was kind of one of our trends of the conference.
Absolutely. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was kind of some of these grassroots types opportunities. Traditionally, what we call field agents have taken advantage of things that we used to do when we were coming up in the industry. And my big message to a lot of our agents was, coming out of COVID, the board's been reset, right? Because a lot of agents felt like relationships were made, people were in positions of power, but there's been so much turnover. And especially in the healthcare industry, and anybody that was dealing with seniors in particular, I mean, a lot of those places have seen 100% turnover. Those industries were the most cautious, had the most COVID protocols, and they were kind of the last industries to get back to normal, so to say. So this year has really been the first year, I would say, where things have been fully back to normal in things like healthcare environments and with seniors and things like that. And so they are just now getting fully operational again. And so my message was to all these agents was, there might have been, relationships and partnerships and networks set up before, but I would go, it's been a reset, because almost all of those relationships have been completely disintegrated or destroyed over the past couple of years. And now it's like the 2.0. It's time for proactive agents to go and have their moment again and go start, hustling down some of those opportunities again.
Yeah, we kind of joke about that agents frequently go around the market too, and pardon the language, they piss on the fire hydrant. They go around everywhere saying, that's mine, that's my territory. I talked to that person, that's my facility, that's my this. And really they did the rounds one time to make a somewhat semi-relationship, and that's it. And then they feel like it's theirs. And that's not the case. And that's the other thing is, no one owns it. There's no contractual obligation. Usually it's kind of up for grabs usually when it comes to local grassroots marketing. And that's just it. It's all perception. So it is really wide open, in my opinion. Usually you go into the market and it's, hey, do you have somebody? What is that relationship like? What are they doing for you? What is that value? And it's, if agents understand, again, that proposition value of, here's what I'm trying to achieve, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, here's the why, and always reminding agents that when they're doing that local marketing, you got to create that win-win-win. How am I going to benefit from this relationship? How are you, this facility, this vendor, this partner, whoever that may be, how are you going to benefit? And how is that consumer that I'm helping going to benefit? And if you can establish that whole value prop and make sure it's clearly understood, that's how you're going to be successful.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about when you talked about pissing on the fire hydrant. I think about the days, especially Humana used to train. The first thing they would teach everybody was go into the senior centers and put your and you'd go in and you'd be like, throw away this agent's cards, put mine in.
Or the Walmart booths.
Yeah, the
agents can relate to
Walmart booths.
That you're like, that SOB. Look, there's agents I know of. They weren't even working the Walmart booth. It wasn't even theirs to staff. And I heard of agents just going in there and like wiping away the boards, throwing away all the pamphlets, throwing away the business cards that were sitting out on the table, whatever else. They're like, I don't want that agent to get a phone call. I'm going to throw away all their marketing materials. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, we've been there.
Or the senior center, like the board, the cork board, where you pin up your pamphlet or whatever else.
Your business card.
You're either ripping it down or putting yours right over the top of it, turf wars.
Cutthroat, ruthless Medicare practices back in the day. But what I was saying, the gist of it was this, guys, because there's so many different ways. And my message was, with how much, and even what we talked about last week on the podcast, with how much digital and how much outreach has been going on to these consumers over the past couple of years, so many of them are frankly burned out. I mean, we hear that people are getting called 20, 30 times during AEP. They're getting called daily. They're getting a truckload of mail all the time. They're getting blown up with text messages illegally and emails. And consumers just, they start getting trained to tune it all out, right? Mm-hmm. And it almost has, I love the phrase, marketers ruin everything. And the marketers, we've ruined a segment of that Medicare consumer population, and they are all going, to hell with it. I just want to find a local agent that I can go drive down to my Main Street thing where I know I can meet this person, that he's going to give me some confident direction, and I'm going to have a person that I know directly. It's not an AI bot. It's not a 1-800 number that I have to call into. I just want a trusted person. And so there's really a revitalization and a boomerang effect for our field agents to have these opportunities. But the gist of it is this, guys, is no matter whether you're working with a doctor's office or a senior center or a 55-plus community.
A pharmacist, a funeral home,
a disability planner, guardian and conservatorships, planners, the navigators, things like that.
Group homes.
There's a million of these different things, guys. But what most agents do is you'll show up with a business card and you're like, give me referrals, and that's never going to work. What you need to do is you need to, like any other relationship, if you want to marry somebody, you've got to date them, you've got to court them a little bit, you've got to add value. And that was my whole presentation was, you need to think about how can I add value to this potential opportunity there, so that person, I can create a win-win-win. It's got to be a win for those beneficiaries. It's got to be a win for that facility or that organization or whatever. And then ultimately it's got to be a win for me. And if you can't create those two prior wins, you're going to have nothing.
Well, and I think the one thing that was enlightening to agents when we were talking about local marketing, and that is still a really, really viable market, just so you all know. But again, it requires work. It requires attention, and it's usually, you're not going to get leads just turned on the pipeline for your first time you show up and introduce yourself. It's just not going to happen. Sometimes you have to go back and build that relationship for anywhere from a couple of months to sometimes a year to kind of get them to trust you. And so that was the other big takeaway, is just the amount of time that it takes, and obviously making sure that an agent is spending an appropriate amount of time working, immediate opportunities, short-term opportunities, and long-term. If you spend all your time, working these little opportunities that could potentially develop into something long-term, well, you're going to be out of business when you haven't made any revenue for 3 or 4 months consistently too.
Yep. So let me get a little bit tactical for a second. Let me talk about some specific examples of how we could maybe add value, right, as agents. Let's say, the senior center is a classic example, right? I mean, I think most agents probably would agree that the senior center is a pretty common battleground. Maybe it's not where you want to be, but I always wrote a bunch of business off of senior centers. Yep. And what I would do is I would go a little bit outside of the metro area. And I would be willing to drive a little bit further than most agents were. And I'd go work with all those, neglected seniors. And some of those have giant facilities. They were main centers and hubs of those rural communities. And people would bus in and come in every day and they would be together. So something that you could do to add value, for example.
I remember you used to ride a lot of Aetna in that one.
Yeah. I was thinking outside the box. I just had to drive a little bit further to, in the most rural, one of our most rural counties in the state here, I was getting in front of 100 seniors every day, and people had no idea, how I was doing what I was doing. But I found this little sweet honey pot, and I figured out that they were all getting bussed in there every day to have this social cohesion in this community. Yep. And
sorry to distract you.
Yeah. But what you could do is, how do you add value, right? All of those people, all of those community managers, all of those senior center operators, all of those 65 plus communities, they're all looking for activities and things like that they can put in front of their seniors. They're trying to fill up curriculum. They're trying to fill up calendars. Come up with some sort of value add that you could go, a program, a little pitch. It doesn't even have to necessarily be about insurance or Medicare. It could be about, hey, are you sick and tired of getting all these calls, these scammy phone calls about your Medicare? Let me teach you how and why that happens. Let me give you some tips and tricks on how to minimize those phone calls. Let me give you some tips and tricks on how to silence some of those inbound calls or something like that on your cell phone. And you could put together a little 15 or 20 minute presentation or something like that and then say, oh, and by the way, I also do Medicare, right? And you start doing those things with intent, with authenticity and good intent and consistency, and you are going to build a very quick community of people that care about you.
Just going back to senior centers, and that was one thing that you just, illustrated on something bringing value someone can do. I used to do a couple other initiatives myself. Senior communities, again, the most blasé, opportunity out there. But I knew that these facilities typically didn't have a good marketing budget or activities budget. And so I would come in and offer and say, hey, you know what, why don't I be your sponsor once a month? Do you guys ever recognize the people in the senior center or in this senior living facility or whatever it might be? Do you ever celebrate people's birthdays? And usually it was no. It would just be cheap. I would go get a Costco cake, order it and be like, hey, tell me the names of the 6 people that month that have a birthday. And I would get a Costco cake, have it written out like happy birthday and put their name on the cake, all 6 of those people. And, I'll try not to get emotional about it. But man, some of these people, it's sad. I mean, they don't even have communication with family members or kids or anything else. First time they've had a birthday cake sometimes in a decade. Right?
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, so I would sponsor that, root beer, soda, birthday cake, just do a social, and the whoever's the activities director or whatever would lead the whole thing, and I'm just in the background, kind of on the side, and they would just say, hey, this is sponsored by so-and-so, and I was just there like, hey, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help, and that was effective. I would also bring in Wii bowling or Wii golf or an activity for people that just something fun. I mean, they're in these facilities or they're in these senior centers, and for a lot of them, they don't have a lot going on in their life, so it was a huge deal for them. I would call bingo for them. And then the other thing that I would do, which was successful, is actually teaching people about social media. Some of these people are lonely and they want to connect with family members, and so I'd be like, hey, if a place had a computer lab, or I would set them up and say, hey, I'll do a thing and teach people how to create a Facebook account, how to do email, how to connect, and once they've built their Facebook profile, how to find friends or family members that they went to high school with or whatever else and start connecting with people. And that was bringing a lot of value to these people and changing their life. And so, of course, if you start doing these services to people, they're going to trust you. You're going to earn their business more. And then when it comes to, hey, I don't have a question about Medicare, but then I got a SAR notice that my plan's being eliminated. I don't understand this eligibility or this re-eligibility for my Medicaid determination. I don't understand this. You were the person that they turned to just because you had the relationship.
Yep.
So anyways, that's just kind of a getting granular into like one specific opportunity and how you actually leverage that. Not, I went into the senior center, pinned up my business card, and my phone didn't ring.
Yeah, guys, and there's a million different ways and opportunities that you can be creative and set up these things. What I like to do is reverse engineer it, look benefits in a certain plan. All of these Medicare, specifically Medicare Advantage plans, are built to solve social determinants of health and health equity type inequities in the markets now. And so in pretty much any market that you go to, you're going to be able to get people with like vision and hearing and flex cards and grocery cards and people that need help with food insecurity and things like that. And all the way down the supply chain there of vendors and distributors, there's a million different opportunities. You could go work with, optometrists. You could go work with hearing specialists on the plan. You can go work with local food pantries and say, hey, I can help get a lot of these people on a plan that's probably going to help with their food insecurity and things like that. There are literally a million different things that you could do to go add value. And I know some of you old heads that might be watching this, some of you agents that have been in it, you're kind of rolling your eyes and going, oh yeah, all the old classic things that they've said. But I promise you, those things work. And right now, they're going to work now more than ever. And
should we get granular with like food banks as an example too?
Yeah, let me finish my train of thought and then you can talk about that. So coming out of COVID, guys, so many of these seniors have been socially isolated. They're desperate. And a lot of these facilities and healthcare things, they're all like, not requiring masks as much anymore. We'll see as long as that holds out, right? But they're finally like back to normal and they're desperate to get together. They're desperate to do these things. And so some of you agents also have got in the business within the past 4 years. Like you don't know a world outside of the COVID insurance industry and you don't know how well and how effective these grassroots things can be. And you only need to have a handful or a good amount of these things really, really working well. And then just, use the hedgehog principle. Once you find something that works, just expand upon it, replicate it, keep doing it out in bigger areas, expanding your territory and keep doing that. And you can be an agent that writes hundreds of policies a year off of just becoming an expert at one of these different areas, right? So,
yep. Kind of just to get granular a little bit more, and as we keep pumping out more of these podcasts, we'll get granular and give you specific examples on some of these local opportunities. But a food pantry, for example. Oh yeah. Well, if you just say, hey, go work with a food bank or a food pantry, it's very generic. It's not enough direction. But we had an agent that I successfully got to, basically get his foot in the door and actually start getting referrals to the point that, they were putting his information on intake forms every time they were intaking new people. But he didn't start that from day one. It took about 3 or 4 months. And I actually told him, I said, look, if you want to win this opportunity, you need to go there and just start volunteering. Go there and actually tell them, hey, this is who I am. Yes, I'm an insurance agent. This is what I do. But, I'd like to get to know you guys. I'd like to get like the people you serve. And what I'd like to start doing to get to know you better is, can I start volunteering here? And then he started, going there once a week for a couple hours before the food pantry opened and help them stock shelves, unload, and he volunteered for a few hours every single week. And after about 2 months, of course, and being in the building and knowing the people and his volunteer work, then it was like, hey, you know what? Actually, we trust you now. What is it you actually do? And he's like, oh, I just help seniors, with XYZ. We have these dual special needs plans. We have regular plans. Everyone's situation is different. Tell me more about it. Eventually it led to that agent being like the guy that everybody was sent to and referred to within that facility, and he definitely earned it. And the other thing that people
was writing 10 to 15 plans
per
a month just
consistently,
off of that one opportunity, a couple hours a week.
And the other thing that happens is food pantries get a lot of perishable donations, so they get canned foods and things like that, but they have needs for things like diapers, tampons, toothbrushes, toothpaste, all those things. And I would actually even sometimes either go get those items and make the donations to the food pantries, or there's carriers that, in some of those marketplaces where they actually can brand them. And if you have a carrier that's involved that you want to particularly help represent or work with, they'll frequently either help you sponsor working with a food pantry, or they'll brand those items and then make the donation so that they get, a little bit of brand awareness or recognition too, or whatever. But that's another way that you're going to go to that facility and say, hey, I'm going to come in and bring you some extra value, not just gimme.
But to bring this home, guys, and to illustrate my point, part 2 of that is that agent no longer does that opportunity anymore because it got killed off through COVID and it went away for years. And I literally just saw on Facebook today a friend donating or working with that same organization, and now they're back fully operational, back to doing business how they used to. So again, that just kind of re-illustrates the point of
new agent now.
It's time someone can go step in and take that opportunity there that was once a great opportunity. I think we're coming up at 40 minutes. So we just kind of wanted to wrap it today. But guys, there are so many different opportunities. If you don't have the money to be buying leads, and even if you do, you should still be out every day. If you don't have appointments booked up, you should be hitting the streets. You should be using the Google machine, finding local opportunities for you, and spending some time to develop these opportunities. Immediately when I finished my breakout session, I had agents come up to me and be like, how do I do this? Or what do I do? Where do I go very specifically to? And I was like, this is where you come in as the independent agent, as the business owner. I gave you the ideas. I gave you the blueprint. I showed you the way. You take the fishing pole and you go fish,
Yeah, we talk, Rich, we were talking military because he understands military. And I said, there's strategic and tactical. And it's like, look, we gave you the strategy, but you need to go do the execution. You know what I mean? It's just like military. Strategic, tactical. Go execute. You got to go put it into motion, and you got to make it happen, because if you're expecting somebody else to go do all the steps for you, you're just not needed in the equation.
And if you don't do it, somebody else eventually will. Someone's going to write that business. Someone's going to solve that problem.
That was a big theme of the conference too, right? Is that pie is growing with Medicare eligibles more and more every year. And, you're taking that self-reflection, that accountability as to, are you growing? Are you stagnant? What are you doing personally? And if you're not increasing your numbers collectively as a whole group of independent agents, that business is getting written somewhere. And it's some large institution. You look at, Fidelity has their own Medicare division now. Walmart's getting into, having their own insurance division. You have all these, private equity groups kind of in one form or fashion or another getting into the industry. You have some syndicated funds, so you have these large entities now kind of getting their bite at the pie, so to speak. So if the agent community isn't out writing the business, someone's writing it. It's just not you.
And if you don't add that value and you don't learn how to get in front of the consumers, you're going to end up, if you want to stay in the business, you're going to end up doing that as a W-2, as an employee of somebody.
Yeah, you're going to end up working for somebody. Yep. So,
all right, guys. Catch you next week.